We're going to take a look at several Martin Dreadnought Authentics. And I've talked about these a lot in my videos. I'm very, I like these guitars. I like the Authentics. I feel like Martin has done a very good job of making a tribute, making a replica of the original pre-wars, the original authentics. I feel like Martin's done a pretty good job of making a modern replica of those. They've got the right truss rod, they've got good tuners, they've got the right glue holding them together, they've got pretty much the right woods. And if they don't have the right woods, like this guitar's Madagascar instead of Brazilian, some of them are Guatemalan, rosewood. I feel like those are pretty good substitutes. And you can even get them in Brazilian too, which we're going to look at here in a minute. They have a few issues. And the number one issue that I see in the Authentics is poor setup. At least what I consider poor setup according to my experience on this. And by poor, I mean specifically too high of an action with not enough saddle to lower it. So let's talk about action real quick for a second. You might say, well, personal preference. Okay, sure, it is personal preference. But there's some guidelines in here. There's a parameter. So if you're looking for personal preference and you're mass producing a guitar for the public, it seems to me like there is a certain set of specifications that you should shoot for. Now me, I worked for 15 years for Flat Picking Guitar Magazine. I was contributing editor, and I think right from the very first issue I was contributing editor. In the process of writing for them, I won't say working for them, I didn't get paid anything, not much anyway, but in the process of working for them, I got to go to a lot of major bluegrass festivals, and with my little Flat Picking Guitar Magazine contributing editor badge on there, I got backstage, interviewed top bluegrass guitar players, professionals, David Greer, Tony Rice, Tim Stafford, Kenny Smith, all those guys, interviewed them. And I also got to play a lot of guitars. So Collins guitar would have a booth. Martin would have a booth. Bourgeois would have a booth. All of the small builders, Dudenbasso, Arnold, I'm just naming names, Hush and Dalton. All these guys would have booths, and I would go over there and I would play the guitars that were already built. When I found one that said, man, this thing plays good, I would whip out my little feeler gauges, and I didn't even know what I was doing at the time. I just was measuring everything I could think of. I'd get out my feeler gauges, and I would measure the 12th fret action, and I would measure it at the nut, and I would just measure the relief, everything I could think of. On the professionals' guitars, I would ask them, hey, do you mind if I measure your guitar? Can I check out your guitar? And every one of them, sure, check it out. So I would measure their action, get my feeler gauges out, do the same thing. I kept all this stuff in a notebook. And after about a year and a half of that, I did it, as I was going. But after I got enough of them, I did a statistical analysis of it. I used to work as a biostatistician for 4 years. My job is to work with a team of PhDs, and I did the statistical analysis for them. So I was fresh off of that. I wasn't scared of numbers at all. So I crunched the numbers on the guitar players' actions, and I found some very definite parameters, which I have on my website. But in any case, just cut to the story. That's how I got my specifications. I didn't make them up. I didn't pull them out of the air. Yes, it's personal preference, but I think you will find that professional flat-picking guitar players have a pretty narrow range of setup that they like. So, just to cut to the chase on that, most of them have pretty flat necks, and they may not even know what they like, in other words, but they've taken it to someone, like John Arnold has done a lot of setups for pros. Norman Blake, you know, I mean, he's Norman Blake's guy. And yeah, I interviewed Norman Blake, check out his guitars. So these guys may not know what kind of setup they like, but they know a good setup when they get one, and they have people that they will take their guitars to, and they'll work with them until they get them set up correctly where they like it, and then they get it. Now, a couple of guys know very specifically what they like. You know, Wyatt Rice, for instance, a pretty good repair guy himself. He knows what he likes, and oh man, the names. I can picture the faces. Anyway, there's guys that know exactly what they like. So, I found out that most of them have very little relief in their neck, very flat neck. The nut slots are going to be fret height, whether they know it or not. Nobody had a high nut slot. And actions at the 12th fret. An average action for a pro flat picking guitar was about 100 thousandths of an inch. And that was for the guys that played rhythm and lead for, you know, not every song, maybe. Let's say Tim Stafford, okay? Tim doesn't play a break on every single song. When he does play a break, it's a break that suits the song, okay? So in other words, I wouldn't call Tim a flashy lead guitar player. He's great, don't get me wrong on that. But do you have a solo guitar album by Tim Stafford? No, you don't. But you have one from Brian Sutton? Yes, you do. Do you have one from David Greer? Yes, you do. I would call Sutton, Greer, that group of people lead flat-picking guitar players. And without variance, without deviation from that, those guys all had an action below 100 thousandths of an inch. So they were much closer to 93 thousandths of an inch on the low E and about 75 on the high E. That is a very standard, very common flat picking lead bluegrass guitar action. The guys that play rhythm 75-80% of the time. Tim Stafford, Dan Tominsky, any of those guys in that category. Kenny Smith, Kenny Smith would be a lead guitar player in some cases, but because he's also playing with singers and playing with his wife, doing a lot of singing, I would still put his playing over in the group guitar player thing, you see. And then, boy, he leans over into the lead guitar player a little bit, but quite a bit of rhythm there, very rhythm-oriented guitar player. Kenny's action's just a little bit more on the 100 thousandths of an inch side, etc. So I'm just dropping these names and just telling you where I got my information. I did not make it up. So when I talk about actions, I have information and data to back it up. So one thing that just drives me absolutely crazy is when someone says, oh, he's got a high action. What's that mean? Back in the late 70s, early 80s, I would read in Bluegrass Unlimited, bluegrass guitar players have a high action. What's that mean? Is that a quarter of an inch off the fingerboard? How high? At some point, I raised my action. I put saddle in there, jack that action up. I thought, bluegrass players have high action. But the word high was never defined, and neither is low, neither is medium. So there's a common post going around about electric guitar player, and that action's too low. It needs to be medium to high. What is that? Give me a number. Give me at least a ballpark. So Stevie Ray Vaughan has a high action. But fortunately, Dan Erlewine and other people have measured that action, and we know that it's around 93 thousandths of an inch on the low E. Stevie's playing basically a bluegrass guitar action with bluegrass guitar strings. He's had, 56 on down to 13 many times. It's big, massive frets, and, so that's a high action. But at least we have it defined. At least we've got a ballpark when we're talking about high actions or low action. What's a low action? You know? I mean, I can set the strings to where they're barely off of the frets, and you could play it, but you couldn't play it very hard, and so, that would be low. So, oh no, that's not low, that's too low, Anyway, okay. So when we're talking about actions on these Martin Authentics, that's where I'm coming from. I've got a set of specifications that I know that real world guitar players are happy with. And I also worked, don't forget, for 9 years as the camp doctor at Steve Kaufman's acoustic music camp, where I was there on the grounds and set up. I had a list, of names, between 40 and 50 guitars every single week that I was there. And I worked from 7:30 in the morning to about 11:30 at night every single day, 7 days in a row. I did a lot of guitars. I got a lot of very, very valuable experience in setting up a guitar, handing it back to the customer and saying, how's this? Or take it to class and come back and see me in an hour after you played it. I got immediate feedback from people, and there you go. So that's where my stuff comes from, okay? So, first guitar we're going to look at is one that's pretty good. Pretty good setup. This is the Shop's D28 1941 Authentic. And I've just been in tons of videos, including 3 that I just finished. You guys have all seen this guitar if you've watched any of my videos. This guitar is stock. Hasn't had anything done to it. In fact, the guy that used to own it sent it to me to do a neck reset on it. And when I got it in, I said, man, that doesn't look like it really needs it. Let me keep it, hang on to it for a while because it's got to get in line. And then he needed some money, and he decided he was going to sell this because he has other guitars. So I ended up buying it for the shop. It's great. I've used it in tons of videos, okay? Point of this is it's stock. I never did a neck reset. He thought it needed a neck reset. I got it in. I didn't think so. The humidity is different between me and him. Whatever the case, I don't know, So, this one's stock, okay? I may have adjusted the nut. I probably adjusted the nut slot. So when we're looking at the Authentics, first thing we're going to look at is the nut slot. I've got a whole video on this, but basically you real quick check is to fret it between the 2nd and the 3rd fret, and it ought to just barely, absolutely, barely clear that 1st fret. And this one does. It's got, the windings go like this. You can see the winding, and you can see that winding just absolutely barely clear the 1st fret. Again, I have a whole video on nut slot, and there are more accurate and technical ways to check the nut slot height, but this is just a quick and dirty way, and it's pretty accurate. But so you're moving along through here. See that A is just absolutely clearing. So the nut slots on this guitar are correct, and I probably adjusted them because we'll look at the other ones that I haven't even touched. Okay, the next thing we want to look at is the neck relief. And you got very little relief in here, probably about 4/1000 of an inch, which is good. Perfect. The non-adjustable truss rods, so you're stuck, If you got too much relief, you're going to have to do a compression refret or something like that. But the point is, the relief is going to affect the way this guitar plays. The relief is great. It hasn't budged in how long have I had this guitar? 2 years now? Now, we're going to get to the action. The 12th fret action, and I'm going to whip out 90,000ths of an inch of feeler gauges because that's where I'm going to start at, and I'm going to pop them up under the low E of the 12th fret. It just barely clears, probably 92,000ths of an inch. So the low E, and this is good for me. I haven't measured this guitar in a while. The low E is 92,000ths of an inch off the 12th fret. The playability on this guitar is, as far as I'm concerned, perfect. It's as good as it's going to get. Doesn't need a neck reset yet, to me. Hold on. Over on the low E, you're going to have probably about 80 thousandths of an inch. I like my E's, my trebles a little bit higher. I don't like them at 76. I like them more about 80. I like to have a little bit of push on the treble strings. 84 thousandths of an inch. So, the treble is a little bit high on this. It could drop a little bit, but not enough to bother me. Now that we've established that all this is good, let's take a look at the saddle. Do we have any room to adjust on this saddle? Obviously, if you're going to go up, you're going to have to replace the saddle. It's a long, glued-in saddle, and this is where Martin is not quite accurate. A vintage 1941 D28 would have a long through saddle. If it wasn't glued in, you could push that saddle back and forth like this. But on the Authentics, they use the technique they use on the Golden Eras, the Marquis, the LSVs, the HDVs. It's a drop-in saddle. It's a long drop-in. The slot is cut in here, and the saddle is dropped in, and then they must cut the bridges in. But if you pull this saddle out, it will not have a razor-sharp end on it. It'll come like this, and it'll have a step in it where it drops down into it. It's not quite accurate, and it does maybe have some effect on the sound, which I talked about last video. Anyways, not important right now. But in order to raise this saddle, you're going to have to heat it up. You're going to have to pull it out. You're going to have to replace it. So, what we really want to know is if this action's perfect, could we go any lower as the top rises and things changes? So I'm going to get my calipers out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the saddle height right here at the low E. Because that's really my main concern. And I get about 115. It's just a little less. It's between 110 and 115. That's acceptable. I would prefer, optimally, to see this saddle at about a 125. So I'd like to see about 10 thousandths of an inch taller at that low E. The rest of the strings, I don't worry about too much because I can see the curve of the saddle is nice. The curve right here. So I know they're all about the same. There's nothing funky going on there. Although, if I was to lower the high E, 85, I'd like to drop it 10 thousandths of an inch. It might not be there. 95 thousandths of an inch. So if I dropped it 10 thousandths of an inch, I'd be at 85, and that's getting low. The reason I say that it's low is that if you take the saddle out, saddle on the shelf, and string it up, these strings will rise off the top naturally about 40 to 50 thousandths of an inch. They don't lay straight flat on the top, but it depends on how much ramp you have on here. But especially the low E, it'll rise off the top about 40 to 50 thousandths of an inch. So if you had a saddle that was 30 thousandths of an inch tall, the string wouldn't even touch it going across it. So it's going to slop back and forth over there. You're going to get buzzes. You're just not going to get a good sound. So on this guitar, while the low E is barely acceptable, the high E is also barely acceptable, and it's okay at the action that I'm running right now, but I got nowhere to go on this. So even if I decided to lower this, let's say this action was, we'll look at the other ones. I got really not much room to move on this guitar. It's acceptable right now, but I really can't go down on it. So, the owner was right. This guitar is marginally ready for a neck reset. But when I measure stuff, I look at it and think, it's acceptable for now. Let's take a straight edge, and what we're going to do is we're going to run it down. This is a common check. It's just a check. It's not the final say-so. The final say-so is the action versus the saddle. So we're going to run this down the neck, and it should clear the bridge. With under tension, it should just kiss the top of the bridge. And you can see it hitting. See that? You can hear it. It's not quite clear in the top of the bridge. So that confirms that this guitar is marginally ready for a neck reset. There you go. And you can see it just touching. So it's acceptable, but barely. Barely. That's the problem with the Martin Authentics. I feel like they should have given them just a click more neck off the heel. I want to see a 93 thousandths of an inch at about 125 on the saddle. That means that you could start here. You could have, if you wanted a high action, say you wanted 100 thousandths of an inch, which, like I said, is a pretty standard, 105. You're going to raise just 20 thousandths of an inch. So 10 thousandths here, 20 thousandths over here, and that's going to bump us up to 135. 135 would be, that would be great at this current action. You don't want to go too tall on these vintage saddles, and I would think 145 would be about as tall as I would want to go. I would want to have, tallest I would want to see is 145 on the saddle with a 105 action. That means the guy's not going to go up any taller on the action, but he does have room to come down to the 90. So you can see the problem here that Martin, everybody has, with setting up a guitar new for the public that does not have a set of specifications that they want, is you really have a narrow range to work in here. If you set this action at 105, I'm going to consider it high. Somebody that really thrashes hard is going to say that's probably about right. They might even say it's too low. If they say it's too low, they've got no room to go up on the saddle because the saddle is already high. They can come down, but they can only come down to about 90 thousandths of an inch, and then they're going to run out of saddle. All right. So if you set it up at 93 thousandths of an inch, which I consider to be perfect, and which lead flat-picking guitar players with a really good controlled right hand would consider to be perfect, the next guy that plays hard and heavy-handed, is going to say that's too low, and he's not going to have room to go up. So it's a balancing act. It's almost like you wish people that were buying a new guitar would write in and say, I want the high-action guitar, and I want the low-action guitar, and they would have their choice of which of these two actions they want. But real life doesn't work that way. It does if you build a custom guitar, But this guitar, this Authentic, is acceptable, but only marginally so. I got no room to go down. I wish the saddle was about 10 thousandths of an inch taller. If I did that, I'm going to have too high of an action for me. So if I want a taller saddle, the only solution here is to reset the neck. So, gosh, let's get another guitar out. Now that we've gone through all this, get another guitar out, and we'll take a look at it. This guitar is a D18 1937 aged Authentic. Just showed up last week. Got itself into a video already. It is, as far as I know, I don't know if this is brand new, if it's used, but it is stock and nothing has been done to it. I have not touched it. This is the first time that I've actually laid it on my bench to evaluate it. I did play it, and in the comments when I was playing, I said, man, the action feels high. Well, we're going to find out. Okay? So let's go through the process. Like I said, let's start at the nut, and we're going to look at this low E. And that low E is clearing by a measurable amount, which it shouldn't. It ought to be just absolutely barely clean. Here's 6 thousandths of an inch, and I'm going to come over here. You can't see it, but I can. Yeah, 6 thousandths of an inch. So at the nut, I would say 6 thousandths of an inch too high because that ought to just barely clear. You'd be surprised the difference that a high nut will make downstream on the 12th fret action. That's why a lot of times people put a capo on the first fret, because it eliminates the nut from the equation. Well, my comment to that is that's good, except for that just means the nut's out of adjustment. So, alright, so I think the nut's too high right off the bat. That's going to affect the 12th string action, but we'll see where we get it. But now I'm going to check the relief. I'm going to hold it at the 1st fret. I'm going to hold it at the 12th fret. And I'm going to tap it in the middle. It looks great. The relief looks great. There's no problems there. We're going to come up here to the 12th fret now. And I can already tell you, I'm going to go with 115. Hear that? 115 is not enough. This has got a high action. Remember I told you 105 would be about as high as any professional bluegrass flat picking guitar player that I've ever measured has. This is higher than that. So that's going to cause problems. I'm going to add another 6 in here. So now we're up to 121. Just clears. 120. 12th fret action is 120. Wow. I would like it. 93 thousandths. Let's just say 90. 90, okay? That means it's 30 thousandths of an inch higher than I would prefer. So yeah, it's a high action. 30 thousandths of an inch is high. That's 30%. If I wanted it 90, 30 thousandths of an inch higher is 30% higher than I would like. That's a lot. That's a lot. It's going to lower a little bit when I lower the nut, but it's not going to lower it down to 90 thousandths of an inch. Let's find out here. I'm going to drop this. I'm just going to estimate what I think it might be. And let's see, I'm going to drop this string down. Oh, I know what it could be. There's a way to do this. It's going to clear that fret by about 16 thousandths of an inch when all is said and done. So I'm going to slip this in here. I'm going to push the string down to it like that. And that's still... You still in there? Yeah. I bet you that drops it down to about 115. Okay, so let's call this 120. And I would have to drop that action 25 thousandths of an inch to get it down to 95. 25 thousandths of an inch means 50 thousandths of an inch at the saddle. And we're not going to have it. This one's going to be... I bet that's 135. $130. So if I have to drop that saddle 50 thousandths of an inch, that means we're going to drop down and it's going to be 80 thousandths of an inch. 80 thousandths of an inch for the saddle. Remember my 41 authentic was 110, 105. And I said that's marginal, you know. I don't want to go too much lower than that. My limit would be 90 thousandths of an inch, and that would be totally out of saddle. So, you know, my verdict on this guitar right now, fresh out of the box, needs an equi-set. It's not a fault. It's not a problem. It's not poor quality or anything like that. It just simply means that when they built the guitar, they didn't give it quite enough off of the heel right here, because Martin's building this guitar for who knows out there in the big world of flat picking guitar. Not even flat picking. It could be, you know, who knows who's going to buy this guitar. And I will tell you this, it is a lot easier and a lot safer to take the neck off and take a little bit more off the heel than to have a guitar that's the other way around and has a low action and a high saddle, and you can't go up on the saddle, and you are... The only thing you can do on that guitar is take the neck off and do a reverse neck reset, where you take a little bit of material off at the top, and that can affect the intonation a little bit, and it's a much worse situation than this guitar, where I'm going to just take the neck off. I'm going to give it a little bit more angle on that, and we're going to get it. So I asked the owner, I said, you know, your saddle's perfect. Right, what, 130? That's what I said previously. I said I'd actually 135, 135, somewhere in there. Your saddle is perfect. If we drop the saddle we're going to drop it too much. And then in 10 years, you're going to need a neck reset anyways, because that's the way lightly built guitars work. Then you're going to have your non-original saddle, because you're going to have to replace that when you raise your action. You're going to have a non-original saddle, and you're going to have a neck reset in 10 years. If we just did the neck reset right now, you're going to keep your original saddle, and you're probably going to go 20, maybe 30 years on this guitar before it needs another neck reset. And if you don't mess with the saddle, you'll be able to reset the neck back to the original saddle, and it's possible that you could keep the original saddle and just keep bending that neck back just a little bit. You probably not have to do it more than once, you know. If I do it now, it's probably going to be good for a long time. But the action's too high right now for me to play for your average flat picking bluegrass guy, and even finger pickers, and even anybody that likes a nice playing guitar. This action is too high. I don't want to lower the saddle that much. I might as well just take the saddle out. You know what I mean? Seriously. So the best solution for this guitar, in my humble opinion, is a neck reset. So that's what we're going to do. Going to reset this neck, drop that out a little bit. So let's say I need to do 25 thousandths of an inch here. That's 50 thousandths of an inch at the saddle. And the ratio from here to the heel is 1 to 3. So 50 thousandths divided by 3. If it was 60 thousandths, that'd be 20. So we're looking at about 12 to 15 thousandths of an inch off the heel, which is not much. You know, that's how accurate this neck angle has to be. Here's 12 thousandths of an inch. Well, 12 thousandths of an inch is your high E string. 13 thousandths of an inch. You need to take the high E string off of the heel here. That's just not much, you know. But that's what it's going to take to get it right in where it needs to be. Okay, let's take the straight edge. Let's run it down here, and let's see what we're going to... It's going to be hitting. Yeah. It's hitting below the bridge. Easy. Hey, this is a fun thing you can do here if you're good at the calipers. You can set it right there, and you can measure off the top of the guitar. You want to do this carefully so you don't scratch the guitar, but you can do it. Set it right there. Drop this down. Right there. 1/430. And then I'm going to raise it up here again. I'm going to do the same thing. One, 4, 7, 5. 45 thousandths of an inch. So I want this edge to come up 45 thousandths of an inch. And if you keep that measurement written down somewhere, you can use it as a third or fourth check when you're doing a neck reset. Let me think about that a minute. 45 thousandths of an inch, and I told you the saddle needs to move 50 thousandths of an inch. Remember that? So see, those two measurements are pretty well in agreement, because, you know, I should measure it a couple times here to make sure. 45 thousandths, 50 thousandths of an inch, the same thing. Both of those measurements are telling me the same thing. The neck needs to move that much. It needs to move about 50 thousandths of an inch at the bridge. I got a little bit of difference because I'm measuring in front of the bridge instead of at the saddle. So geometrically, mathematically, that is going to change a little bit. But our point is, we can accurately get a couple of measurements here to make sure we drop that neck in right where we want it. 45, 50 thousandths of an inch. And both of those translate, divided by 3, translate to about 12 thousandths of an inch. Times 3, 36. More than that. 16. 16 would give us 48 thousandths, yeah. 15, 16 thousandths. I mean, I can't tell you I can do it that accurately, but it just gives me a rough idea. It might take a little bit around, take a lot off the heel. I'm not taking much. I'm not taking much off of the heel, and when I do this guitar, I'm going to put it in my neck reset jig right here. I have a whole video on the neck reset jig, and I'm getting ready to build another one to take to Los Alamos with me, and I would use that as actually my final check. But these multiple checks like this just let me know that, yeah, that needs to move about 45, 50 thousandths of an inch at the saddle to get this guitar playing primo. All right, let's get another one. All right, here's the boss hoss of the group. This one scares me, but they already told me don't worry about it, so I'm going to try not to be scared. A D45 Authentic. Okay, it was in one video a little while ago. I played it when it first came in. I said, gosh, feels like the action's high, and it has the biggest, massivest neck I have ever felt on a Martin guitar. It's wide. It's a 1 3/4 inch neck. It's very, very deep, and with a high action, it was like, whoa, man, that was a handful of guitar. This is the first time I've had it on the bench. Same deal. Let's go through the process. The same process here. Gonna go up to the nut. Super high, man. The other one was what, 8 thousandths of an inch? I'm gonna take a 12. Not quite. It's about 8 thousandths of an inch high. So, that was consistent. 2 melts on the D, 2 melts on the G, 2 melts on the B, 2 melts on the E. All the net slots are high. Which, again, it's easier to lower them. And I understand that if you're in a factory and you're doing your final setup, and if you blow that nut slot just a little bit, you got to redo it. And then you got to refinish it. And you got to do all this stuff. And so, man. And when they do the D45, they spray the lacquer over the nut. So, yeah, I sure don't want to replace this nut. And I'm not going to have to replace it. I'm just going to lower the nut slots. But I guarantee you that when I'm lowering those nut slots, if it comes to one more slice, one more scoop with that file, I'm stopping. I'm not going to risk blowing those nut slots. Sorry. I'm in the same boat. All right, relief. This one's got more relief than the other two. This one's got a measurable amount of relief. It's not terrible. I bet it's got 8. Looking for a capo. There's a capo. Hold on. The others were so low that I didn't even bother measuring them. They were probably in the vicinity of about 4 thousandths of an inch, but this one looks a little bit more. It's just for fun. I'm not going to adjust it, because to adjust it means planing this D45 fingerboard, and I am not going to do that. Sorry. So 8 thousandths. More than 8. This doesn't have an ebony truss rod in it, does it? 10. Alright. 10 thousandths of an inch. That's what most people would consider acceptable. It's not quite acceptable to me. I would much rather shoot 4 thousandths of an inch. But I'm not going to worry about it on this guitar until it needs its first refret. And then I'm probably going to work with the relief on the frets. I'm not going to do it. But I think 10 thousandths is acceptable. I wish it was lower. Alright, here we go. Action. So I know the action is going to drop because those are high. So here's 105. 105. Well, that's a pleasant surprise. It's actually lower than that. Huh. So you know what it is? It's the neck making me feel, this is going to be alright by the time I lower the nut slots. The action's going to be good. What a surprise. See, this is why I measure them, because my feel said, man, this action's high. This is through the roof. I can barely play the guitar. I said that on the video. I said, man, I can barely play this guitar. But I didn't complain too much about 37 D18. I said, it's high, but I played it. The neck depth made all that difference because on this guitar, gosh, it's loud. With this guitar, because the neck is so thick, I feel, the overall action is big. Okay, I'll talk about the overall action in a minute. Here's 96 thousandths. Yep, 96. Yeah, 98 thousandths. I mean, it's just barely clear 96. So I think an accurate measurement would be 96 thousandths. That's not bad. When I adjust the nut slots, that's going to drop down to about 93. I bet you anything. There's 76 to go across to the treble. Wow. Just barely clears. Accurately 78 thousandths of an inch. I'm surprised. I really am. But that's why you measure stuff, you see. Now I can say, no, it's not the action. The nut slots are high. It's not the action that, thank God, I don't have to do neck reset on this. Okay. Okay. The action is not high. And it's going to be perfect by the time I clean up the nut slots over there. So that's good news. I'm surprised. Let's see what kind of saddle we have here. $140. Yeah. Oh, I'm getting a little less on that time, but $130. Yeah, $130. That's great. For the action that it has, especially when I drop the nut slots a little bit, this action is going to be perfect. The saddle is perfect, and I cannot tell you how happy I am to report that. That I don't have to do a neck reset on this D45. That would take 10 years off my life. So that's good news, okay? So, cool. So they got the D45 right. So out of the three authentics that we've looked at here, let's sum up on this. Wait, hold on a minute. I was going to talk about something. Let me think. Let's run this down the fingerboard. Since we've decided that the action is, that the neck angle is pretty good, let's see what this ends up being. And see, it just kisses. It touches just barely. But as soon as it has just a little bit of pressure, it rolls up on here. We're going to do this double measurement on this one too, just so you can see. That's hard to do. Alright, so I'm going to do that measurement here. Well, I'm going to... This one's not aged, so... Super careful here. Set that down there. I don't want to push down on the yardstick. 140/40. 1.440. Raise it up on here. $1.450. 10 thousandths of an inch. Big deal. That's nothing, you know. So I got 10 thousandths of an inch difference between it just touching the bridge, in front of the bridge, where what that showed me is the neck angle, okay? I'm not pushing up on the bridge. I'm bringing it to right here. This is the neck angle, and this is what it would be if it's sitting on top of the bridge. So that's what gives you the two different measurements. In other words, if the neck angle was too far back, your straight edge would be like this. And then you would go, oh man, to get it to touch the bridge, I've got to push it down. So then you would have a negative number. You have too much neck angle, because obviously if this was the neck angle, you've way overset that neck, and your saddle is going to be this high. You know, your saddle is going to be this tall. So this tells you that would be a grossly overset neck. And anything like, let's say, this let's say it's touching the top, that means the neck's way underset, and you're going to have to really bring that neck back, okay? So it just tells you how the neck angle compares to the bridge angle. And nobody ever said they have to be the same. It's just, you get these numbers in your head after a while. We could see on the other two that they really needed to go up about 45 to 50 thousandths of an inch to make a match. This guitar is only 10 thousandths of an inch off, which is pretty close. I could be an error in measurement on the first one because I didn't get my head down there and look. And when it comes across here, it is touching. It is touching. So it wouldn't be a bad thing if this neck was back 1/1000th of an inch on the heel. I mean, that would be okay. That would give us a saddle of 135 with the same action, and there'd be nothing wrong with that. That would be absolutely smack dab on the nose. Perfect. But what we have is pretty close. Okay? So that's what this measurement here tells us. It gives us the neck angle versus the bridge angle, And all we did was we did that in comparison from all the three guitars so that we could see a third set of checks, okay? So this guitar action is great. All I'm going to do in this, thank God, is drop the nut slot, and I'm going to be very super careful to not go too much. I'm going to drop this nut slot. I told you it was 8 thousandths of an inch clearance right now. I'm going to drop it to probably 6 thousandths of it. 2 thousandths of an inch clearance. So that's going to be a drop of 6 thousandths. And you'll be surprised how much difference that'll make down here. It would turn this into cushion as far as playability goes. Oh, I know what I was going to talk about. The real feel of the thing. When I was talking about this thing having a big neck. It's massive. I'm going to measure it here in just a second. But when I measure the feel of a neck, I measure it with the strings on and the frets on and everything. And a lot of guys are real critical of that. They're like, oh, but you should measure the fingerboard. Well, what if the guy's got low frets or high frets? And your real feel is your hand. God, I hope I don't bump it. Back. There we go. Back of the neck, top of the strings. Okay? That's your real feel right there. That's what you're going to have to do with your hand in order to get your hand around those strings. So if you have a massive neck like this, you're going to have to open your hand up like this to get from the thumb to the fingers. And if you have a super skinny neck, let's say this one, super skinny neck, you see, now my hand's like this. And it's a much different real feel. This is a lot different from this. These are exaggerations, but you can see my point. So when I measure necks, I always do what I call the real depth. And I set it up here. And I just hold the strings down and I measure like this. With the strings on, clamp them down to the frets, and I measure the back of the neck. 1.210. That's massive. That gives me the real feel when my hand is fretting the note. I've got the string in there, I've got the fret in there, I've got the depth of the neck. 1.210. Is that what I said? I'm going to write that. I'm going to get one of these other guitars. I'm going to get the 37 out because I had a big neck. So we're going to go to the 10th fret. Yeah. Because this is as far as I can go before I start getting into the curve of the heel here. And I'm going to make sure that this little gap is in the same spot right there. 1.210. Remember that. Okay, I'm going to get the 37 back out and measure that, and we'll get this measurement. Good news on this guitar, it's in good shape, man. I just got to do the nuts, and it's good to play, and I'm going to have to get used to that neck. Till the owner comes and takes it away from me, which he's going to do soon. But that's good news on this one. We've evaluated, let's get the 37. Here's the 37, D18 37 authentic. We're going to go to the same spot, 10th fret, smush the strings down, and they all have medium gauge strings on it, so don't worry about that. Holy cow. 1.155. 1.155. 1.155 on the 37A. So the 45 was 1.210. This one, the 37A, is 1.55, and I think most people would tell you that's a pretty big neck. I'm going to get the 41. Here's the D28, 1941 authentic, and I've measured these before, but here we go again. My measurements on this one before it was a pretty average. I measured a ton of guitars. I did this with a ton of guitars, graphed them, put them in there. I think I have a video on it. I don't know. I found out that this was one of the slimmer necks. Compared to a 70s, this is a little slimmer. But we're going to do it on video again here. So, bring it back over here. 10th fret. Put the mark there. 1.070. 1.070. 1.070. 41 authentic. Huh. We're going to have to get the 39. The 1939 authentic. We didn't talk about this one in the evaluation because I've had this guitar before and I've already done a setup on it. Let's just measure the neck right now. I've measured these before too. Right there. 1.045. Really? Seriously. It's thinner than the 41. 10th fret, right? There's the dot. One, 0, 4, 5. Darn, I didn't think it was thinner. It felt fatter to me. 1.045 39A. So, that's a massive difference, okay? The 45 was 1 inch. They're all 1 inch. So 0.210, almost a quarter of an inch, almost 1 1/4 of an inch. And the 39A was 1.045. That's a lot. The 41A was 1.070. I would have sworn that was a thinner neck. The 37A was 1.55. So the 37A versus the 39A was 100 thousandths of an inch thicker. The 37A is that much thicker at the 10th fret. That's pretty significant. Your hands are... I can feel the difference between high E and B, which is 3 thousandths of an inch. And I can especially feel it when I get it in my hands and play with it, rather than being stretched like that. So 100 thousandths of an inch is all these 2 sets of strings put together. No, yeah, the whole set of strings. So this is a 56. So 2 of these together. So anyway, there we go. Gosh, that's a lot about authentics, you know. I always give you guys way too much information. Nobody can absorb that information. Just real quick, let's see what the action is on this 39A, which I set up a long time ago. We'll start at 90 thousandths of an inch. It feels pretty good. Might be a little high. Wow, that's high. It feels okay because of the thinner neck. 105. Whoosh. Gosh, let's just go to 115. $115. Wow. All right. So I'm gonna have to splice this 39 in there. I don't know. We'll leave it right here. You guys can. 115, too high. And this is my saddle. 110. Neck reset. Yeah, the nut's perfect because I've already done this in my hand. So, you know, my D28, remember, was 90, right about 90 thousandths of an inch with this saddle. And it was great, you know, played great. This one is 110, 115, 15 thousandths of an inch higher. Running this down here, bump, big bump into the bridge. It's aged, so I don't have to worry about scratching it. Let's get down there and get that. There we go. 1/420. And 1/475, so 35 thousandths of an inch. No, 55 thousandths of an inch. I said 20, didn't I? Yeah. So 55 thousandths of an inch. Difference. All right, math time. 55,000. I'm going to write that down so I don't forget it. A lot of numbers here. So I have an action of 115, right? Yeah, 115. Maybe a little bit less, you know. Let's say 115. I want to drop that to 95. 115, 95. 20 thousandths of an inch. 05, 95. 20 thousandths of an inch times 2 is 40 thousandths of an inch. So 45 thousandths of an inch change here. And I measured 0.55 change. So if you split the difference on that and call that 45, again, you're between the 45 and the 55 both agree pretty well. And so I'm going to end up calling that probably about a 50 thousandths of an inch change at the saddle. It's saying 15 thousandths of an inch off the heel. So it's the same as the other D18. It's not far off. It's not far off. But 15 thousandths of an inch off the heel is going to drop this action right down into where perfectly where it should be. The saddle would be perfect on that. So I'd reset the neck on the 39 too. Now, the one thing about this 39 is it does have a little bit of age on it. Because I first did the setup on this at least 2 years ago. So it's, you know, it's settling in quite a bit here. Look at the top distortion. And, yeah, it's, you know, it's bowed in right here, so it's settling in. And our neck relief, I think it's pretty good on this one. Yeah, neck relief is real good. Less than 10 for sure. Alright, I think the 39 needs a neck reset too. Now, you know what you notice about this? The two guitars that I think need neck resets are both mahogany. The two guitars that are both pretty good are the two rosewoods. Guitar needs a neck reset not because the neck is buckled or anything like that. The relief is great. It needs a neck reset because the body collapses right here at the waist. And that's what I was checking here. I've talked about this before because I built a cardboard guitar and this is where it folds up in. The waist is where the guitar folds up out. This is a weak spot because it's not a straight line and there's a sound hole in the way. This is why Adamus went and made all those little sound holes to get this stronger. Your popsicle breaks, you get cracks along the fingerboard because there's no support here at the sound hole. You see? There's a big hole right here, so there's just this amount of wood right here. You never get cracks out here from the popsicle brace because there's wood. So the point of all this being is this is the weakest spot on an acoustic guitar right here across the sound hole. They collapse. They fold in like this. And it doesn't take much to do this. Pressure like this takes this guitar and makes it fold right here. And you get distortion right up here. It's not really a belly so much. There can be a belly. But when people see this, a lot of times it's really a hump down in here. And you can prove that by setting your straight edge over here And you can see the dip in there, especially if you move it back to different points. You can see the dip right here. And like I said, I built a cardboard guitar one time, and this is where it broke right here. And as soon as I supported it with more cardboard right there, it held. So this is the weakest spot on an acoustic guitar right there. Alright. Both of the guitars that we're looking at today that I think need neck resets are mahogany. The two that are not are rosewood. So, mahogany is a weaker wood. If you ever work with it, it's weaker wood. Mahogany guitars want to collapse right here. And these have cloth strips in them, of course, because they're authentic. If I was building mahogany guitars period, I would put wooden reinforcement strips right here. I would put 1/2 inch wide wood reinforcement strips to help keep that body from flexion. I would do that, and I might even reinforce it further. I might investigate using doubling the sides. I don't know. I think the reinforcement strips would be good. I can tell you this about this reinforcement strips. I had a D28 come in one time that I'd worked on. It got shipped, and during shipping it took an impact that split it clear to here. And I had also a 1949 D18. If you go back and look at my channel, a 1949 D18, what we called splinters, and it was cracked right here. Anyway, on that one D28, when I played it, then I fixed it. I used wooden reinforcement strips all the way down on both guitars, and both of those guitars had a terrific mid-range punch they didn't have before. Stiffening the sides like that changed the sound to what I considered the better, because I'm all about mid-range punch. So, gosh, I've talked a lot about this. All right, I'm going to cut out of here. So, our moral of the story is both of our D18 Authentics need neck resets to be optimum, to be really nice, playable guitars without changing the saddle. So, we don't want to change the saddle because the saddle is great right now. And we get that action down. We need to take the neck off, take about 15 thousandths of an inch off the heel. It's not a big deal. Put it back on with hide glue. The action will be beautiful, it'll be perfect. 15 thousandths not much. It's not going to significantly shrink the heel or anything like that. You're not even going to be able to tell. It's the thickness of a B string. That much. That's off the bottom of the heel. The action is going to be perfect. The guitar is going to play great. It's going to be good for the next 20, 30 years probably. It's a minor adjustment. Yeah, the problem here is the expense, and a lot of people complain, and I understand, you're upset. You paid $5,000 for this authentic or whatever you paid for your authentic guitar, and now it needs a $300 neck reset because the factory didn't get it quite right. But once again, I just go back to the dirt bike experience or the mountain bike experience. My gosh, mountain bikes are even worse. The guys got these $8,000 mountain bikes, and then the first thing they do is they replace the hubs, and they replace the wheels, and they replace the chain ring set, and they replace all this stuff, and they think nothing of dropping another $500, $2,000 in this already horrendously expensive two-wheeled contraption that they're never going to get a dime back on. And so you're going to take $300 and tune up your guitar that you just bought, and you're going to put the action right where you want it, and you're going to get it good, and then you're probably never going to do it again in your lifetime. It doesn't seem like a horrendously expensive investment. Maybe, other people charge more for neck resets. I charge $300, and I get it where you want it, So, yeah, it's a drag. But I don't have a single toy. That doesn't require something. I bought a Blues Junior amplifier back at the beginning of the year. I got the upgraded one that has the Raging Cajun speaker in it. But people buy stock Blues Juniors and they replace the speaker, $100, $150. They put the Frommel cap kit in there, $50, provided you could do it yourself. You know, they replace this, they replace this, they replace that. And they got $250, $300 easy in modifications to this already pretty good amplifier, you know. And that's not even playing with tubes, you know. So I'm just saying, every toy, you got to spend the money on it to get it right, to get it where you want it. If you don't, then you can be happy with this mass-produced guitar that's made for the public, and maybe you're Joe Q public and you're perfectly happy with this action, you know. I'm not. My customer's not. We're going to fine-tune it. Whew. Bye.